Hey there, best of Trekkers! It's been a while, but it's time to start ranking the seasons of Trek not in my original ranking series of every live-action episode in the franchise. Today, we've got a controversial one talking about Picard's second season. Thanks for joining me. I'm your host, Dustin Wing. Picking some grapes at number 106, Look Up, or The Stargazer. Truly one of the best setup episodes in modern Trek. Starting out, it seems like Jean-Luc may have finally fallen into a comfortable relationship, even if it's not a formal arrangement with Laris. It's only too bad that won't go further than this season. Seven's still trying to save the galaxy all by herself, unless you count the merged Rios hollows aboard La Sirena. Elnor becomes the first Romulan cadet in Starfleet Academy. Meanwhile, Soji and Jurati are on a diplomatic pomp and circumstances tour, where Agnes gets hit on by a warlock from Game of Thrones. And where will leave Soji with one of the horniest races in the galaxy to never be heard from again. Beyond Picard's relationship status, we find he's a chancellor at Starfleet Academy, a title which he seems to have renounced by the next season. It's nice catching up with Guinan after 25 years, even if her bar 10 forward is a bit conveniently named. The build-up here is slow, though nowhere near as slow as Season 1. But the real action is in a Quentin Tarantino style, the end is the beginning trope, which we come back to with a hole in space calling Picard's name that births a Borgina-class vessel, and a weird Borg trying to take over the new Rios-captained USS Stargazer, before having to end with the easiest auto-destruct sequence in history. Rather than Picard waking up on the Black Mountain, we instead end up with Q, which takes this episode to a new level. While this season takes some weird twists and turns that seemingly go nowhere, this initial setup episode is really well done. It hits a bunch of emotional pressure points and creates enough mystique to make me really want to see where this goes. This episode is sandwiched between Enterprise's future tense below it and TOS's I Mud being one better. Jumping to the Mirror Mirror universe at 189, Atonement, or Penance. This is maybe the most ominous start to any episode of Star Trek. Q takes Jean-Luc on a tour of his alternate life, including his decapitated head collection with the prized Skull Ducat. The rest of our main cast come into focus in weird roles from president of fascism to dissident terrorist. For not being the proper mirror universe, this might actually be more interesting and feels far more real. As we here in the real world hit the same year our heroes are heading to by the next episode, this future feels unfortunately more likely by the day. How long before we end up cheering for the execution of our enemies on stage as part of a spectacle? Unclear in the year of the Bell Riots. What is clear though, Patton Oswalt as an AI cat is the cherry on top of this interesting look at fascism not so far from home. I'd rate this episode as one better than TNG's Starship Mine and one worse than Discovery's Vaulting Ambition. Searching for signal at 3:05, Assimilation. This episode doesn't start on the greatest of notes with the death of Elnor, the main character that was often sidelined in the first season also. The few times modern songs with words appear in Trek, they usually feel out of place. But using this amazing cover of California Dreamin' just feels absolutely perfect, right up to Rios smashing his head on the fire escape due to a faulty transport. Which, in and of itself, the glitchy transporter effect is pretty cool. Immediately after Raffi gets mugged in a sanctuary district, it leads to this spot-on line about our current-day problems and how there's no reason for our society, obsessed with wealth, shouldn't collapse. Meanwhile, Jurati takes her first step to being a new Borg queen by going into the current one's mind to find info they need about the Watcher. What drags the episode down some is how useless Seven and Raffi become for the rest of the season starting here. They just kinda wander around Los Angeles to fill time, without doing anything useful for the plot. Rios finds that not all in this time is terrible, as a very kind clinic doctor patches him up with few questions asked, though the wonderful agents of ICE pick him up, and it's suggested that he may never see the light of day again. The episode is more great setup, and unfortunately paints a pretty grim yet accurate picture of our modern society. But hey, Rick and Morty is now part of Trek canon. This episode resides between Voyager's two-parter Basics below it, and Enterprise's Stratagem being just a smidge better, acclimating to the realities of the 21st century at number 100. Who supervises the supervisors? Or Watcher. As Picard enters the ruins of his future home, the memories of his mother start rushing back, a theme that will become more pronounced as the season goes on. A really fun tidbit lies in bringing back the punk on the bus from Star Trek IV, and another fun 80s actor callback comes as the famous Leah Thompson directs this episode that sneaks into the top 100 in Trek. The singular thing that brings the episode to that status is Guinan and her preaching of more spot-on observations about how screwed we've made things for ourselves on this planet. And the bit about facts not even being facts anymore hits really close to home. The cherry on top that makes this great is Rios telling immigration in the smuggest of ways who he is and the actual reason he's here, including the line about how no one can explain what's with Picard in his synthetic body. The whole thing culminates in Picard finally finding a Watcher that looks like Laris and is a heck of a way to bring this to an end. This episode lives between TNG's two-parter Redemption below it, and DS9's Blaze of Glory taking one better seat than this one. Flapping the Butterfly's Wings at 347, Shifting Sands, or Fly Me to the Moon. Following up on the end of the previous episode, Picard sees a ghost, in the form of Talon, an ancestor to his Romulan indentured servant / friend with benefits, Laris. Raffi and Seven rescuing Rios from an immigration bus is probably the most helpful thing to the plot they get to do through the course of the season. Leah Thompson returns in this episode as more than just the director, in an acting role as the woman that shut down present-day geneticist Adam Soong's work. We're introduced to Kore, who will not have any meaningful thing to do in the plot whatsoever by the end. Meanwhile, the Borg Queen is probably the most interesting thing about the episode, luring a cop to La Sirena, even if it would lead to Jurati taking her out for good. The episode overall is mostly showing us the things Q did to change the timeline, for the sole purpose of messing with Jean-Luc one more time. Which, while interesting, is kinda slow. This one finds itself between the slightly better waking moments and the slightly worse collective, both from Voyager. Bursting into song at 4:02, Shadows of the Night, or 2 of 1. Season 2 got off to a great start in these rankings, but the middle episodes fall pretty fast. This one is a whole lot of fun, and we have the wonderful Jonathan Frakes in the director's chair to thank for it. But it strays pretty far from a normal episode of Trek, and culminates in Jean-Luc being run over by Soong doing a Grand Theft Auto mission to take out the aging automaton. Though music with lyrics in Trek is often out of place, Agnes running interference is an amazing scene. Even if the EMP she used to knock out the power would have fried most of the lights in the room for good, we get some more flashes of Picard's younger self and his mom as he's fighting for life in Therese's clinic, but that's the episode in a nutshell. It's a lot of fun, but not a ton of substance aside from Jurati's dress, which earns it a mediocre ranking between TNG's Rightful Heir and Voyager's Hunters. Coming original at 311, Behind the Door, or Monsters. This episode teaches us more about Jean-Luc Picard than 8 seasons of television and 4 movies have combined. As Talon digs into his mind through some technobabble and tries to save him, we get a more focused look at his childhood, and even his father as a psychologist working him through it. This whole season really helps explain why Picard in the first 3 seasons of TNG is so rigid and different from the post-Locutus version we see after. His mother wasn't well, and it affected him through the rest of his life, finding it hard to love or even connect with those around him. The high point of this episode is probably Talon hearing some of the great Picard soundbites from TNG. Outside of Picard's head, Seven and Raffi continue to fake a plotline, trying to capture Borgatti and failing at it. Rios also gets a little closer to Teresa through a Star Trek IV callback, and the cherry on top is Patrick Stewart's wife and her band making a cameo at the end. To set up the next episode, Guinan tries to summon a Q through some weird Elorian backstory before being raided by the FBI. I find the whole exploration of Picard's mom to be highly interesting, and this is a great psychological thriller, even if the rest of the plots are pretty superfluous. This is just a bit better than Voyager's The Gift, and a little behind TNG's Ship in a Bottle. Influencing the Past at 521, Touched by a Vulcan. Or Mercy. We've reached the bottom of Season 2's barrel. The craziest FBI officer not named Fox Mulder loses his job after proving that aliens exist, just to satisfy a memory from his childhood of finding some Vulcans in the woods doing research on Earth. The episode has one interesting scene. In Guinan meeting Q, where we find out Q's at the end of his life, and his powers are on the fritz. Raffi and Seven continue to wander aimlessly around LA in search of Borgatti. For some reason, Q helps Corey escape Soong after she finds out she was an experiment. And outside of Q, this episode could be removed from the season, and it would overall be about the same. I guess this might be better than the meandering through caves in Sword of Kahless, and not so great compared to Voyager's Concerning Flight. Creating a new order through chaos at 94, Hard Choices, or Hide and Seek. As the title implies, there are 3 games of mildly interesting hide and seek going on. One with a holographic Elnor keeping the encryption codes to La Sirena away from Borgatti, and another game on a much bigger range with more hiding places, as Data's great-great-great-great-grandfather tries to take out Picard and his friends, and Jean-Luc is forced to remember the memory he'd repressed all these years out of guilt as they go down into the World War II tunnels under his family home. Finding out the ultimate fate of his mother is one of the most tragic things we've ever seen in Trek, but it also rounds out Picard's backstory and explains an awful lot about the man we first meet at Farpoint. The other great moment of the episode comes as Jurati lays out a new way for the Borg, basically a collective run by Federation standards. It's the most classic of Star Trek messages. Toward the end, we get a really nice reorchestration of the already impressive Season 2 theme, and see the biggest piece from the intro credits as young Picard breaks the solarium window following the passing of his mother. Every single season of Picard peaks an episode or 2 before the finale, and this is as good as the season gets in the top 100. The episode is preceded by DS9's Inquisition and succeeded by Discovery's Into the Forest I Go. Putting right what once went wrong at 247, Destiny, or Farewell. This episode is quite the mixed bag. It contains one of Trek's best ever scenes, and a bunch of questionable garbage writing as well. Overall, a decent watch, especially after time is put back in place, but not the well-put-together ending one might expect after such a good lead-up this season. Let's start with the biggest problem with the episode and maybe the season in general. Adam Soong, the disgraced scientist, now looking to leave a legacy, even if it means a worse future for mankind. He has way more access and clout than any person of status should, especially in breaking into mission control, and him leading a team of super soldiers from the last episode. Not Data as the bad guy this season really didn't work super well. About as well as his backup plan of drones to sabotage the Europa mission that Raffi disables through a nanokorg audio mixing controller, and just because we throw in a reference to him being involved in creating Khan and Friends back in the 90s, after his other prized work Corey deletes his entire database, before she takes off with Wesley Crusher as the Traveler, which in and of itself is a split moment in Trek. Nice to see him, but if neither he or Corey reappear in Trek somewhere in the future, it's kind of a wasted moment. Wesley won't help Picard get out of his mess, but will make Corey a new Traveler as the previous one did for him. Makes you wonder why Q helped drive her to the Travelers. Talon's death wasn't a piece of the episode that played very well either. And when the season first ended, I wasn't ready to pass judgment on whether this single kiss between Raffi and Seven was just queerbaiting or a sincere moment. But the lack of acknowledgement of a relationship at all in Season 3 leaves me wary of how the relationship was used in the show. They did kind of feel like the lived-in old married couple that's been together forever with their banter across the season, but ultimately it didn't follow through. What did work and is totally worth watching the whole season for are the final moments between Picard and Q. It comes to the crux of Q's obsession with Picard across his life, and the moment Jean-Luc realizes that after his experience in Tapestry, and now through a changing timeline, he has to set himself up to be disappointed as a kid, even if it means a lifetime of carrying around this tremendous burden of guilt. The end of this pairing that's been together since the first episode of TNG hugging near the end of this episode, and supposedly Q's existence, is the most fitting end to the greatest odd couple in history. Despite the loss of my favorite character from the show, Rios, I fully respect his decision to stay with Teresa. He definitely fit in better in the 21st century, as we see through the season. And like all good things, we come all the way back around to the beginning, where we find out the real problem this benevolent collective needs help with is a galactic threat to all the Alpha Quadrant. The only frustrating thing is that we haven't yet followed up on who or what caused this thing that collapsed into a transwarp conduit. I just wish the rekindling of things between Picard and Laris at the very end here would mean something going forward. The episode finds a home between Voyager's Unity and Deep Space Nine's Blood Oath. I only liked elements of this season when I first saw it, but it's grown on me with each subsequent watch. It definitely has its problems, including the final episode, but there's also so much to appreciate throughout that I actually consider this one of my favorite seasons of Trek overall.
Satire is Trek! Satire is Trek!
What exactly is the great General Jean-Luc Picard being summoned to the palace?
Why, sir, it's Eradication Day.
Today, my fine fellow!
Today? Why, it's Christmas Day.
If we fail here, we fail Elnor.
But I do know that in this, our darkest hour, I'm grateful.
You had a colleague, tall, round.
Kevin?
Yes, Kevin.
Give this to Kevin.
Give this to Kevin.
Give this to Kevin. Kevin.
Give this to Kevin.
Renee. Picard.
Are you there, Dad? Dad, I hit something with a card, Dad.
If the Queen means to take over the ship, we have to defend it, no matter the cost.
This is my house. I have to defend it.
And you could be Earth's next great hero.
I'm doing my part.
Or yours.
It is you, Ichabod Crane.
Which, if we are right, would mean
We have 3 days before the future is changed irrevocably.
Oh my God. That's today.
Have you heard of the story of the girl